Hi guys, in this video we're going to be painting up Konrad Curze Primarch of the Nightlords. I'm going to be showing you my hints, tips and techniques and philosophies on how to create this beautiful masterpiece, so buckle up for this deep dive. So just a quick word warning before we do get into the video. This is not your typical paint along video, you know, where it's like a step by step, like base coat, layer up, wash and all that sort of stuff. Hopefully with this video, and this is the reason why hopefully people come to me and my channel, is to see my painting process. Now this painting process might not be the one that you normally use or how you paint yours, and there might be quicker and easier ways to do it. But I'm just going to be sharing my hints, tips and philosophies, and hopefully you might be able to take something from one section and put it into something else, or you might take, you know, like a colour or a technique and be able to apply it to whatever miniature it is that you're painting. But I just thought it'd be really interesting to share my full painting process with you guys, and hopefully you'll be able to take something away from it. So first up, let's talk sub-assemblies, and again this is a Forge World resin miniature, so obviously you do need to be following their guide when it comes to, you know, like gluing and using super glues and giving them a little bath beforehand. So as you can see here, I've detached the little men from the base, and you might be seeing a little bit of green stuff because I've magnetized these so that the customer can choose whether to display it with or without these little men. This green stuff is literally, there's a magnet inside there and that's covering that, but these will be covered or painted over a little bit later. The reason I use sub-assemblies as well, it just makes the painting process so much easier. Now this little, like, it's not his hero base but his standard base, so if you're going to use him in a game, there is a magnet, a couple of magnets in there which I've attached to it, and then also as you can see here, this just helps it, you know, it secures that into place because it is a little bit loose. As you can tell, I've just dropped it. It is a little bit loose on that side, but what it does, once the miniature is all put together, it just helps secure that into place. I've also added a little bit of texture paste and like sand, grit and gravel to this. This is again entirely up to you and how you decide you want to paint yours, but just be careful and dry fit these areas just to make sure that everything slots together nicely. Then we'll move into the head. I kept the head separate just for the painting process, and this just makes life so much easier so I can get into it, because Konrad Curze's head sort of sits like his chin sits a bit more into the armor on this miniature, and again I've kept the cape separate as well, just so that makes, you know, like areas a little bit more accessible and easier to reach, and then I can paint this completely separate. The body, this is what I've glued together, so it's pretty much, it's held on its base. Again, this is to make the painting process easier, and I'm sort of using the Forge World base as a stand or something I've got to hold on to, and a little bit later I'll clip it off so that we can glue it to the base. Now let's talk a little bit about priming. Now, even though I've already explained in the video, this is not like an army painting video to make things easier. However, when it comes to priming and stuff, there are still some steps that I can take to make my life easier and faster, so such as this cape, because it's going to be a flesh colour, rather than do it in black and try and work up through layers, and it's going to, you know, take a little bit of time to reach that opacity. For this I've used the rattle can from Colourforge, which is standard grey. And I've also done the same for the head option, and again it's just going to help me be able to get those flesh tones a little bit faster and easier. For the body itself, I've done this in black because I want it to be a bit more of a darker blue, and I can work up through those layers. And again, this is just matte black by Colourforge, but any sort of black will do, like Chaos Black and all that sort of good stuff. Now the base, I've actually applied 2 primers to this, and this is for 2 reasons. Because one, I've used Colourforge's Hyrax Brown. This is going to get all like my nice brown tones, and then I used Trench Brown as like a zenithal from above and just sprayed that all over the miniature, because we want like a limestoney looking base, and this is I'm just sort of killing 2 birds with 1 stone with this. I'm sort of achieving 2 of the tones of the colours that I want to achieve, and then it's just be a nice base up to work from. But again, you know, you don't have to do it in this way. If you want to spend a bit more time painting everything up and making that process just maybe from black, you're more than welcome to do that. But again, even though I'm painting in this like non-traditional way, I'm still looking for ways that I can speed up and make the process a little bit easier. Now for the blue of Konrad Curze's armor, we're going to get a really nice like dark base coat, and for this I'm going to mix in AK Oxford, which is like a really nice like desaturated dark blue, and then we're going to add a little bit of Vallejo Model Air blue, And then as a final highlight, we're just going to mix in 50-50 with that blue, just a small amount of the Ionic blue from Army Painter. Now you can probably see on screen that I did have like a darker colour for some shadows, which is Calther blue. In end, I didn't actually use this. I actually used Leviathan purple, and once I'd gone around and done everything, I just fired that into the shadows. But it's just a case of getting, like working up your layers and make sure you're thinning those paints in the airbrush. And again, if you want to do this via brush, you can do that for all you airbrush people. Sorry, not for all you airbrush people, for all you people that give me grief for using an airbrush. But yeah, just work your way around and then start adding your highlights, just, like adding to the small areas. Now, pay attention to light volumes on this miniature, because when he is on the base, he's sort of like slanted a little bit. So some areas are going to be in shadow, a little bit different to like what you normally would have if your miniature were like just stood upright, because he is sort of on a slant. So just be careful with those. But once I'd gone round and done everything, like I said, I got a little bit of thinned down Leviathan purple, and I just fired that into the shadows. Now what that does is obviously create a nice shadow for the purple, because I think purple goes nice with the blue for shadows, and it also gives it that little bit of a like ethereal tone to his blue armor. Now you might look at it at first and think, it looks a bit too bright and blue, but don't worry, I know it might look like an ultramarine at this point, but we are going to knock that back down a little bit later on. And then finally we're going to get a little bit of Elfic blue, and we're going to now move to our dry brush. Now the reason I'm doing this is because Konrad Curze has got these really nice like sharp angulated edges all over his armor. Now given a lot of this is going to be trim and painted in other like areas, but it's a good idea to get this like desaturated blue and just give everything a dry brush. Now this is such a light dry brush, I'm literally just catching all those like nice sharp edges, and just work your way around your miniature. Now if you want to learn and do dry brushing properly, then I'd highly recommend going out and learning the Artist Opus way. He's got a really good tutorial over on his channel, and it's going to get rid of that like chalky, dusty, horrible effect. But for me, I don't normally like do edge highlights and stuff, but because this miniature was so nice and angulated, I had to go through and like make sure that all those areas are all picked out and make sure that they stand out. And again, like I said, we are going to add some shadows and like panel lining and stuff to this a little bit later on, but just make sure you are going out and picking out all those lovely little edges. Now we're going to move on to the flesh, and for the flesh I mean like all the like dead skin areas that Konrad Curze has sort of got on him. And for this cape, now he does have like a normal under cape, which is like a red colour, but it's got all this like nice awful like flesh and faces that have been skinned off and people skinned alive that are on him, and these are the areas that we're going to paint. And as we work his way around this miniature, you might see some areas that are painted and some areas that are like not, which I might have not explained, but this is just because I've done them in a different order when I've painted it. However, for this video I'm going to try and keep it nice and consistent. So for this, I've just give everything a base coat of Vallejo Succubus skin, and then I got Cadian flesh tone, and from like a zenithal highlight like downwards, I just gave it like a zenithal prime like downwards on top of that skin of Cadian flesh tone. Now for smaller areas such as like his little tabard on the front of him, I call it his skirt even though it's not, for that I had to apply that via brush, because obviously we've just done that nice airbrush work and we don't want to get any overspray, and there's nothing wrong with doing it via brush as well. Now one thing I will say about skin, all these skins, is because you don't want everything to look the same, because he's murdered and killed all these poor little souls. What you want to do is try and get a bit of variation on that skin tone. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get some washes from Citadel, and feel free to use a variety of different washes, and that's, experiment with them and mess around with them. So I've got, like Targor Ragshade, Berserker Bloodshade, I've even got some like greens in there, Reikland Flesh Shade, and I'm just applying these all over the miniature just to certain areas, just to break up those slight skin tones to make some look like they're a little bit darker. And you can even use a couple of contrast paints like Gulliman's Flesh or Dark Oath Flesh. But what you want to do is try and create separation between those panels of flesh. And what that's going to do as well, it's going to run into your crevices and just make everything look like gory, horrible, with like your Mortarian grime and all that sort of stuff. But you want to try and make some look a little bit more aged than normal. Now to highlight those back up, I use like a dry brushing motion, and we're just going to use again different flesh tones. There's no specific ones that you have to use, like you might be able to use some like darker flesh tones, some lighter flesh tones as a highlight, to dry brush over the top of them again to create all those sorts of different flesh. Now the skulls themselves, I'm not going to go detailed into them on this channel, on this video, sorry, but I do have a video on skulls, and it's the exact same recipe that I used for all the skin and bones around his body, including like he's got this like little rib cage and stuff underneath his stomach. But that is the recipe that I used for the like the bone areas. Now blood, now this is a big thing on Konrad Curze, and there's a couple of different ways that we can apply blood, and it is quite simple. It just uses a couple of different paints. So the main one, which is going to be our base, is obviously blood for the blood god. Now when you're painting like dead parts on his flesh like this, naturally he's going to have blood that's like leaked down, and it's going to have been sat there for a while, so it's going to like solidify. So there's ways that we can make our blood look a little bit more aged, and that's by mixing in like some dark brown contrast paints. And again, this can be any sort of dark brown contrast paint, or even blacks, like Garagak Sewer, Wildwood, any sort of brown paint like that, or you can even mix in Agrax Earthshade, just to dull it down. And I've just added some little streaks, and then I've also added some splats, and then I go back to like to make some blood look a little bit more fresher in areas like he's just like killed these guys. And you know, you don't just go mad and just like blah, blah, spray it all over. Literally, you know, like be a bit more careful with your placement, adding some splats here, some streaks, and like some runs as though the blood's like sort of gone down a little bit. But again, just work your way around adding all that. And what's nice is you get a bit of variation in that, because it's got that glossiness. It just makes everything in tie and look a little bit more gory. Now for the painstaking task of doing all his gold trim, and this took quite some time. So, but yeah, be very careful with this because it is a very detailed miniature. But all we're going to do is literally work our way around with using Pro Acryl bronze. Now I know I've said bronze, but Konrad's got this like really like dark bronzy goldy colour, and this is perfect for it. So work your way around, base coating everything out that you want to be this colour in the bronze, and then we're going to go, you know, which is my favourite contrast paint, Rattling Grime, and give everything a little wash of that all over your miniature. But pay attention to this section, really take your time with it, because there is so much detail on this miniature and trim. So just make sure you are catching all those areas. And then once that contrast paint has dried, just give it a like another little dry brush of the bronze just to fetch it back up a little bit. And then as a final highlight, we're going to get Runlord Brass. Now with Runlord Brass, obviously it's a very similar colour, but it's a little bit lighter in tone. And again, we're just going to dry brush this all over those metallic areas, and don't worry about sections like underneath because they're naturally going to be in shadow, but trying to catch those like main highlighted points and just dry brush them all over. It is quite a simple step, just using like the bronze, Rattling Grime, and the Runlord Brass, but again, it is going to take up a lot of time. And for all the silver metallic areas, again, we're just going to, it's quite a simple like 3-stage process for this. We're going to base coat everything in Vallejo Metal Colour Series Gunmetal, and then again we're going to go to our Rattling Grime, give everything a wash, make it look that little bit more grimdark, and then as a final highlight we're going to get Rungfang Steel, and then just again dry brush all that areas. Now for his little claws, like his little Wolverine claws on his hands, for these as one final extra highlight, I got Vallejo Model Colour Air, not Model Colour, Vallejo Air Paint Silver, or Vallejo Game Colour Silver. Just it's a little bit brighter than the Rungfang Steel, and again I just gave them one last little highlight of that just to make them look that little bit sharper. Now Konrad does have some red areas on this miniature, which includes his like shoulder pauldron, like the wings. I think the bats. It might be bats. I'm not right sure with the lore, and also his cape. So for this, we're going to give everything a base coat of AK Black Red, and then we're going to add a little bit of AK Dirty Red, working our way up to Mephiston Red, and then finally, and only for the shoulder pauldron, like the bat wings as I call them, I'm going to add a little bit of Wild Rider Red as a final highlight. And again, for the cape, I know he's only got a very small section at like the bit that's visible, but the bit that's underneath, which is like facing his back, I just dry brushed this area for the miniature. Now, as I did mention a little bit earlier on in the video when we were painting his blue armour, that we were going to knock it back a little bit. And for this I've got Ica of the Damned by Villainy Inks. It's an enamel wash, and I've thinned it right down so that it just literally flows, and I've not added any varnishes or gloss varnishes, anything like that at this stage. It's just so thinned down that it is literally going to run into all those crevices. What that's going to do, it's going to knock back the armour and like desaturate that blue a little bit and take it back down. And then it's also going to act as like our panel lining and separate those arm panels even further. And then obviously when it dries, it's going to give it that grim dark look. And then once it has dried, it's just a case of getting like a sponge or a cotton swab and just tidying up any little overspill areas. Now, one final thing to do to the main bulk area of Konrad Curze's armour is just add some chips. And I'm not going to do Rhinox high chipping, sponge chipping, anything like that. All I've got is just a brush, and as though I'm edge highlighting, I'm just going into areas and like sort of dinking the armour where it would be just straight with Iron Warriors. And I'm not like adding like chips and then going in and back and adding a little bit more. If you want to do that, you can, but for me I wanted to add something a little bit different to this and make it look a little bit more ethereal with the chipping, as though it like thin paint or whatever, and it's just gone straight down to the bare metal. And I've just worked my way around. I've just added like the odd chip, dink and edge highlight broken up here and there. Now I'm going to talk, obviously I have sort of glossed over it a little bit because I didn't want this video would be hours long if I went through everything, but obviously there are a lot more details around the miniature that you can paint using the colours and fundamentals that we've learnt in this video, and it's just a case of touching all them up, tidying them up like his chest plate, like the little like that's all painted in like bone areas, and then the little wings inside, they're done using like the flesh colours that we used previously. Now, one of the main parts of this miniature that you're really going to want to take time is the face, and again I gave this a like base coat of the Succubus skin by Vallejo, and then I got the Tamiya flat flesh, and from a Zenithal Prime down I gave it like a just like a Zenithal Prime little light dusting over the top. Then after you've done that, what you want to do is just black out all the hair just using AK black, and the hair is so simple. I just dry brush this using greys, so you could use like, I think for this I used Corvus black, and then I mixed in a little bit of Eshin grey just for the highlighted areas. Now for the face himself, I gave everything a wash of Tagore Rag Shade, or Rag Shade I think it's pronounced, and just let that run into all the crevices, especially around the eyes and mouth. And then once that's dry, I got a little bit, because I want his eyes, for this I wanted him to look a little bit more like vampiric, a bit more pale skinned, and I got a little bit of Magos purple contrast paint, watered that down a little bit into like a wash consistency, and applied that around his eyes. And then just for the highlights, it's quite simple. I got Flayed One Flesh, which is like a really pale skin tone, and it's just a case of picking out all the little areas like his nose and eyebrows. But what you want to do is thin this, so it's going to be like 60% water to 40% paint, and you literally just want to get tiny amounts on your brush like I've mentioned in previous videos, and use like a stipple in and just really start to build these up to get your desired effect. And then one last little thing for the lips, I got like the contrast paint, Flayed One Flesh, and really watered that down, and I just put a tiny little line of it on his lip just to make that lip stand out at the bottom. And then if you want to glaze some shadows in, I just got Rhinox hide and just glazed a little bit of shadow under his chin and down the side of his face where the shadow would naturally be. Now the base, because it is a hero base, again I always stress that you must paint bases as though it is a separate miniature, especially when it's something so exotic like this, like a Primarch. But for this it was quite simple. I wanted like the stonework to be more of like a limestone colour, so I'm stippling on like Karak stone, and then we started to dry brush like lighter colours on there, such as like Upshanti bone and stuff, just to make it look a little bit more of the limestone colour. And then because we've already got some rocks already implemented on there, I've got some different browns. Just literally use any browns you want just to break them up a little bit and start to paint in some like little rocks and stones that are like separate from everything. And then I gave the entire thing, we're using 2 enamels for this, so I've got like a dark wash, which is like a brownie wash, and obviously streak and grime. Now I want to like make sure that when I'm doing my streak and grime there, it is actually streaking, so I gave everything like an overall like unified wash. and I got a little bit more streak and grime after the removal process, and just added some extra little streaks in as though like rain and grime had started to run down. Then I got some Copious Earth by Krautcover. I love this basing stuff. I'm going to do a separate video on these because I think they're just amazing. And I just started to got a little bit of PVA glue, sprinkled this all over certain areas, and then just literally got my AK pigment and gravel fixer, not pigment fixer, gravel and sand fixer, and just added those to like where we've like sprinkled our like Copious Earth. Then you can, if you want to get fancy, you can start to add like dirty downs and moss effects, and I just added a little bit of moss here and there to make it look that little bit more weathered. And then these little like sections, like adding grass tufts and stuff, is completely optional to you if you want to paint yours in a different scheme or scheme. God, I can't get my words out today. But again, these are just little sections that you can add and like put little bits around. But I did add a little bit of grass tufts and like some separate flock to it just to break it up a little bit. And then for the little guys, obviously I've not really gone into depth with them, because again, this is a section that you can get creative, and you might want to paint them up a different army scheme if you know, if you're like someone who likes to fight like certain solar auxiliary warriors and stuff. But for me, I've just done them in like a black colour, but again using all like the blood and flesh colours that we've previously used in this video. And that brings us to the end of this tutorial. Now I know I've obviously skipped over like little bits and stuff like that, but again, I didn't want to sit here boring you for hours. I wanted to get like the main fundamentals down and everything like that. But this, you know, I love painting Primarchs, and if you want to see me paint Perturabo, I did that's actually a 2-episode one, because his base is so big and so like intricate that I actually did it in 2 parts. So if you want to go and check out Perturabo, then links for that will be in the description below. But again, I really want you to take time with these miniatures, and because these are your standout pieces, these are the guys, you know, that you want to put your time and effort in. And I know it's not like this video is not like your traditional like army painting video, and you might look at things I've done and think, God, I'm not going to do it that way, it's too much of a long process. But hopefully you can take something from these and take something from this video, whether it be inspiration or a technique or a certain way I've done something, and pick and choose where you want to add it into your miniatures. Or you can even use the fundamentals and techniques and add different colours to create different looks. You know, it is your miniature, your painting, you've paid for it, so you do what you like with it. But again, I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you're enjoying these Primarch series, then let me know in the comment section who I should do next, what video, who should I paint next for the Primarch series. But again, I hope you've enjoyed it, and please remember, it really helped me out, guys, if you could just take 1 second, it helps me get this video out, if you just take 1 second to tap that like button. And if you're new to this channel and want to check out some of my more videos, then please hit the subscribe button. So until next time, guys, I'll catch you in my next video.